Never ask for advice. We all know what we need to do. Deep down in our hearts, in our intuition, it knows. We know what we need to do in this moment, and asking for advice is just another way to avoid doing that which we know we must do. It's a way to give ourselves more options, to rationalize why we shouldn't listen to our intuition, which may be scary, which may be not what we want to do. But we can also look into that feeling and realize that it may not be what we want to do, but it feels so natural. It feels more unnatural to go against the flow than to go with it. And even though our intuition could be pushing us towards discomfort, towards hardship, towards difficulty, there's something so much easier about that than going against the flow, lying to ourselves, sinking into a depression, and just kind of being a walking zombie, just merely existing, not living. And that's why I think we should never ask for advice. One way or another, we have to tune up this internal compass that we have and trust our intuition. And when we ask for advice, we're just delaying that process. When we make mistakes on our own, we learn more. When we really commit ourselves to taking our own advice, we listen more. When we do this time and time again, the voice gets louder and we can discern the voices because there's the ego and then there's intuition and then there's a bunch of other noise too. And you really need to work through that. It's not easy. I know I say that you can feel it and you can, but it's like a radio station. And if you're really far away from the radio station, it's going to take a while and to find it. I'm saying in terms of numbers. I don't know the right terminology, but you have to tune into it, and then you get the frequency right, and then the sound's better. And the more you do this, the more and more solitude, the more and more honest you are with yourself, the more and more aware, the more and more unbiased, the more you can detach. The louder that this gets, and the more that you can see your path, the more that you can really understand that which you need to do. And when we take advice from people, it just delays that process. It delays the divinity that we need to live a life true to ourselves. Carl Jung talked about how, I think it was Carl Jung, but he talked about how everyone's out here looking for mentors, thinking that they can't do anything unless they have a mentor in the field that they're pursuing. But he says, no, look within. We all have a mentor that was divinely created for our individual self, for our individual life, for our individual purpose. Why would you not listen to this? Why would you not trust this? And Steve Jobs said, you know, the intuition is outside of space. Or not. Sorry, Steve Jobs didn't say that. Steve Jobs said, trust your intuition. It somehow knows that which you want to become. And it's so true. It's so true. And for some reason, everyone, I don't know, doesn't want to trust himself or wants an excuse not to trust himself. I think there is a certain level subconscious sabotage. And, people say that, but I've never really believed it. But I don't know, it kind of feels like there might be something there. Because if you know the good, as Paul said in Romans, and you don't do the good, there must be some self sabotage in there, one way or another, whether it's human nature or whatever it is. By definition, there's, some self sabotage in that. But I think the belief system and the whole drive behind asking for advice inhibits our growth. It really affects us because it's a door that you leave open. When you close off when you close off the door for advice, then you look more deeply. It's like in the Art of War. In the Art of War, he talks about how, now everyone knows this military strategy or the concept of it, but when you put your When you're at a disadvantage in a battle, you put your army with something behind them, whether it be a river or a wall, a mountain, something where they can't run. And when you do this, they fight twice as hard. And that's the same thing with trusting ourselves, with walking our own path. When you leave this backup, when you're half-assing it, when you have one foot in the door, when you're saying, "Oh, maybe someone else knows better. Maybe someone will stop me. Maybe I'll get a chance to skate out of this and, say, oh, it wasn't meant to be." You're obviously not going to live a life true to yourself. You're obviously not going to get divine help. I remember one time I heard, funny enough, technically he was my mentor, but he told me that he was my mentor, but he told me that, he was a Christian, and he told me that, God, if you give 99%, God isn't going to help you. If you're only giving 99%, and no, not even only, like 99% is you're 1% off from everything God gave you, but he still won't intervene. He still won't, because, and why would he? Why would we want him to? Why would you want God to help you when you're not even giving all that he already gave you? And why would he be incentivized to help you? He gives you 100% more power, and then you still don't use it all. So his whole idea was that if you don't give 100%, if you're not fully committed, then God won't step in. And once you give that, say if you're 99, once you give that 1%, it's exponential, because then you're working with God. Then you have the unlimited capacity. And, it goes back to that Bible quote where it says something along the lines of how the future God has planned for you is better than you could ever imagine. And when we don't give 100%, God has no reason to step in, and we shouldn't want him to. And it makes sense why he wouldn't. Why would you help a creature who's only giving 50% of what you gave them? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And this is the same way with everything. If you really want to find the internal advice, the one that really aligns with your soul, so you can just somehow become what you're meant to become without really even understanding how, walk this path into this perfect alignment of belief systems, wants, desires, needs, passions, and then you just end up there, and you say, I wouldn't change this for anything. You need to start trusting your intuition. It's outside of space and time, and that's the advice we should be taking. External advice is useless. Now, external conversations, working through things with other people, gleaming insights, telling them your problems, I don't think this is, well, telling them their problems is it's a slippery slope, I guess, but like close friends, you can have conversations with people. I'm not saying that nobody is worth talking to about higher matters, because all you need to do is look within. Socrates has this whole idea of, well, I guess Plato wrote it, but Socrates was talking in the dialogue, and he says to this guy, how do you look at yourself? And the guy goes through a whole thing, gets like a bunch wrong, and then finally he's like, oh, a mirror. And Socrates is like, yes. Before mirrors, how did people look at themselves? And how, or no. So for the external world, we use mirrors. For the internal world, what can we use? Because it must be natural. It must be given here already. Because God wouldn't, he wouldn't make a stipulation like you need to first build a mirror to look into your soul. And the guy thinks, gets a bunch of wrong, and then finally says the I. And Socrates says, yes, we come to know ourselves better. We come to learn our soul when we have conversations with other people and we look in their eyes and we see our reflection in their eyes. It's symbolic, but it's also literal. Like, you see your reflections in people's eyes when you look at them in the eyes. And when you also engage in that deep of eye contact and a conversation of that nature, you see into your soul as well. You get a glimpse inside, as well as see your external form. And that's, yeah, conversations aren't useless, but going to somebody and be like, I really need advice on this, or I really need your opinion, you're not really torn. If they say if they say A or B, you're either going to be relieved or sad that they didn't say the other one. What does that mean? You know? That means you already know what you want. But for some reason you want an excuse not to do that which you know you must do. You want to be able to rationalize it. You want to be able to not feel bad for not doing that. And then if they confirm, say, yeah, you should do this, which was what you know you should do but are avoiding, you'll probably seek more opinions. But if they tell you not to do it, you'll probably just end the line there. You don't want to take the risk that someone else will pick the other side, and then you lose some weight in the internal compromise, in the internal coping. But I think you get the point. We are our own best advisors, right in here. And don't listen to that at your own peril.